Hilchis Mechira Pedig Shleish Aser. So we're learning the din of Ino. General din is that if the Ino was less than a sixth, so then it's Mechila. If it was more than a sixth, so then it's Bittul Mekach. The person that was Nisana has a right to be Mavatal the Mekach. And if it was exactly a sixth, so the person that was Me'ana, the person that committed the Ino, has to give the person that the Ino was committed to back whatever the Ino was, the sixth. And the Ino could be either the Moicher could be Ma'ana if he overcharges, or the Leker could be Ma'ana if he underpays. That's the din that we learned until now. Now, before we were talking about when you pay money for an item, so the question is what's the real value of the item and how much did you pay for it? Now we're talking about exchanging one item for another item. And one item is worth more, one item is worth less. That's this din over here. Perish leishaser. Hamachlif Keilim beKeilim. He exchanged one Keli for another Keli, or behema bebehema. Afilu machad b'shirayim. He exchanged a needle for shirayim. Shirayim is a coat of armor, which is obviously much bigger than a needle and much more expensive than a needle. A tle besus, or he exchanged a tle, which is a small animal, for a sus, for a horse, is ein leino. There's no din hino. Why? Because shazer reitze b'machad yesim shirayim. This person wants, now he needs the machad, this person needs the shirayim. So even though as far as the monetary value, so it says here shirayim, it really should say shiryim. Shiryim is the coat of armor. So this, even though as far as money is concerned, the shiryim is worth much more than the machad, or the sus is worth much more than the tle, but lepel, this person needs right now a tle, this person needs right now the sus, so therefore for him it's worth more. The emphasis you have to l'chura understand, because generally speaking, the whole idea of Ino means the person wasn't aware that there was that he was being overcharged or undercharged. It was clearly told that, listen, this is the price of the item, and lepel, this is how I'm selling to you. So the Ram says clearly that b'chiyah gavna there's no din Ino. So l'chura over here in this case, where he's selling a machad b'shiryen, so you don't really need l'chura the svara, because that's reitza b'machad, that reitza b'shiryen. L'chura without that, the person sees clearly. He says he's giving a machad and he's giving a shiryen, so it's obviously not the same value. Al derez etla nasus l'chura tzorich beer. What do we need this beer? Because that reitza b'shiryen v'zeh reitza b'machad. But I'll quote upon him. That's the din. The din is that a machlef Keilim beKeilim. So even though one is worth much more than the other, but lepil, that was the deal. He wants the tle, he wants the sus, two separate items, or two separate kelim. He wants the machad, he wants the shiryim. So therefore, there's no din of hinoy. Avol hamachlef peiris bepeiris. So this din was talking about kelim bekelim. Kelim bekelim included either machad b'shiryin or a tle b'sus. Mashenkin, if you machlef peiris bepeiris, peiris would be like chitim f'zeirim. Is bein sheshamu esim kedem mechira, whether they assessed it before the mechira and lepela was assessed wrong, or bein sheshamu esim achim mechira, or after they made the exchange, then they assessed it, and as Mishnah adds, while they're still asukim ba'isa inyan, and they realize that it wasn't a fair exchange as far as money is concerned, as far as the value is concerned. So then is yesh l'neino. So when you exchange kelim b'kelim, there's no ino. There's no ino, period. Masha'inkin by peiris bepeiris, so whether or not the assessment was before they made the exchange or after they made the exchange, so then either way would be a no. But meduyik over here, because Mishnah is medayik, that this din, that there is a no by peiris, is only if there was an assessment. So in other words, if two people exchange and there was no assessment made, in other words, this person says, I have this amount of chitim and you have this amount of seirim, and let's make the exchange. And they made an exchange. And then later on, after a while, they were no longer asukim beis inyan. They realized that there was a not fair exchange as far as the value is concerned, so then there's no ino. The whole din of ino is either there was befeirish an assessment before they made the exchange, and that assessment was wrong, or there was an assessment after they made the exchange, and they were still asukim beis inyan, and they realized that the assessment isn't fair. So then there's ino. Masha'inkein, in a case where there was no assessment at all, so there wouldn't be eno. So by Keilim Nachmal, the din is, even if there was an assessment, whereas this assessment, either Kedem HaMechira or Achar Mechira, either way is Ein Lamino. So that maybe answers what we asked before, that L'chura, it's obvious that this is worth more. So for some reason or another, even if there was an assessment, and the assessment was that there's no eno, but nevertheless, in aliba dams there was ino. But lepel, since zeretz, it's still hard to understand. I mean, zeretz b'macha, zeretz b'shiryen, so therefore there's no ino. So by Keilim there's never ino. By Keilim there's never ino. By Paris, it's not always ino. By Paris and Paris, if there was no assessment made, not before the mechira, not after the mechira, there's also no ino. Mashenkin, if there was an assessment made either before the exchange or after the exchange, and they were still asukim beisayinyan, so then there's yesh lamino. That's talking about Paris b'Paris. Alikeach b'domim achsera. If a person goes ahead and takes a handful of money, and he goes and buys an object against shechafan limois, he takes a handful of money, and he doesn't really count the money. So we learned before that normally mois is not kenes. Mois is not kenes. When a person pays for an item, it's not kenes. Both of them can have charata. Masha'inkin, in such a case of chafan mois achsera, knows he took the money and he didn't really count the money before he gave it. So then that mois has a din of metaltalin, and therefore it is kaina. The money is kaina, is opposite. But nevertheless, even though it's kaina, so l'chura it sounds like an exchange of peiris b'peiris or keilim b'keilim. So we're saying no. Over here it doesn't have a din of a keilim b'keilim. It doesn't have a din of peiris b'peiris. Over here it has a din of mois, and therefore there's a din no. Is by mois there's a mamish din no. There's no kulas in no. If lepeil there was a no, so you have the din of a no, as we said, more than a sixth or less than a sixth. Masha'enka by peiris b'peiris, it's not as kuladik as by keilim, but on the other end, because over there could be a no, but the no is only if there was a shuma. By peiris b'peiris there's only a no when there was a shuma, and by keilim even with a shuma there's no no. So there's three madregas. There's keilim that there's no no period. There's peiris that there's a no if there was a shuma, and then there's money which there's a no even without a shuma. So that's this din alikeach b'dom achsera. So even though legabi the din kinyonim has a din of peiris or keilim, and memela it's considered something which could be kaina, but legabi hilchas ino has a din of mois, and mois is always the zino. You don't need a shuma. Nachmal halacha beis halikeach b'domim achsera. A person takes b'dom achsera, which means kigoyin shechafan li mois. You took a handful of mois. V'amrle, and he tells to the seller mecheli parascha be'elu. Is afal b'shekene b'chalipim. He's kaina for the chalipin of this mois. Abers kani is tak a kaina. This mois has a din not like mois, that has a din like metaltalin. But nevertheless, umazar ino, he has to return the ino kamesha biyarnu. And over here, there's no din of dafke if he was shamuesa, not dafke if shamunis in the clouds. It's the regular din that there's din ino. But who adin lekeach peiris achsera the selo ishtayim. A person says, I want to take these peiris for selo ishtayim. So it's also shekana. He's koiner the peiris. He makes a ma'aser kinyan on the peiris. But umazar no, but he has to return the ino. Knows if lepel there's a discrepancy between the money that he's paying and the payers that he took, so he has to replace it. So there's a din of mazar no. So again, so even though the it's being done l'chura achsera, so l'chura you can say they're not so makbid. They're taka not so makbid as far as the concern is. The knows they didn't count the money before they gave it. So therefore, that money doesn't have a din of money as a din of Keilim, as a payers. But on the other hand, it has a din of money in the sense that after they take a look at the money and they assess how much it was the true value of the item and true value of the money, and mainly you have to be mazir deino. That's this din. So kana or mazir deino k'mei shabiyan. Now that is there. If you go ahead and buy peiris achsera, which means you take peiris achsera, you just take a handful of peiris, and you say this is going to be for a seller. So you have to make a cheshbon. If it's taka for a seller, if it's for a seller, so it's a seller. He gives him a seller. If not, he gives him back either the payers or he gives him extra money, depending on what the deal is going to be. Bala bias. So that's this din. So again, we're learning three dinim in ino. We have the din of buying something for money, and that din of buying something for money is even if you likech mois achsera, and al derez if you likech peiris achsera. So there's always the regular din of ino. Then there's the din of exchanging peiris bepeiris. So then there is a din ino, but that's only if there was either the shuma before the exchange or the shuma after the exchange, and then there's the din of machlav keilim b'keilim, which machlav keilim b'keilim there's never ino. Halacha gim. Ha'omer lechaveri al manas she'ein lecho alay ino. So in other words, I'm selling you an item, or I'm buying from you an item, but I don't want you to have a tinus of ino on me. In other words, if there's ino, I don't want you to have any tinus of ino on me. So the din is yeshle olav ino. So in other words, we're going to learn Hamshech, you can't be moichel something that you don't know what you're being moichel. So Mela, since you don't really know how much is being overcharged or undercharged, so there can't be really a mechil over here. Elamai, there was a tanai in the transaction that the din of ino shouldn't apply here. That doesn't help. Because since ino is a Torah dikadin, so it's a masna, mashachas b'teira. You could be moichel money. If I know how much money I'm being moichel, I can be moichel. I can't be moichel money that I don't know how much I'm being moichel. And I also can't make a tanai that the din of ino shouldn't apply in this transaction. I'm making a transaction with you, but on the condition that in this transaction the din of ino shouldn't apply. So the din is yeshli olav ino. So there is a din of ino. He didn't tell him. It's not clear how much ino is going on here. So nas ein beino sounds like I'm buying it for you. Amanas that there's really no ino in here. Shari yeshbei. Not ino love ino, but amanas ein beino. Abel b'mafarish. But if he makes clear how much he's really being ma'anim, how much he's being overcharged or undercharged, and nevertheless that person is meichel, so then is eli ino shekol tnai sheb'mam kaim, or tnai sheb'mam kaim. Kesa. Meicher she'amal lekecha. Meicher turns to the lekech and says, Chayfetz zeh shani nesim misayim. This chayfetz which I'm giving you for 200, yedei I know she'en neshava l'mana. Amanas she'en lecha hino. Amanas that you're not going to have a tain of hino on me. Ani meichel lecha. So the din is ein li olav hino because he told him clearly how much he's overcharging, and he was meichel. So that's beseder. V'chein likeh. That's when the meicher was overcharging the likeh. V'chein meicher she'amal lechaverei. Chayfetz zeh shani lekech nimcha b'mana. The chayv that I'm buying from you for a money, you need that sheshav masayim, and I'm paying you much less than its value. Al manas she'ein l'cholai, you know, the sale should be al manas that you don't have any tinus v'ino, ani l'ken m'cho, ein li olav v'ino, and that's because it was clear what he was meichel. So you notice when it's not clear what you're meichel, so the mechil is not a mechil. And on the other end, you can't really make a tanai that the din of v'ino shouldn't apply him because the din of v'ino is the din teira. Masha'enkin, if it's clear what he's being nisana, so then he's beferish mechila and called tnaisha, and by mammon a mechila helps. Halacha hey, hanoisei v'hanoisim be'amuna. Someone that's handling be'amuna. What's that handling amuna? He tells the person that's buying from him clearly how much he paid for the item and how much he's profiting from the item. So normally a seller doesn't usually tell the person how much he's profiting from the item. So the din is that he's not allowed to charge for the item more than its regular value. And if he does charge you more than its regular value, from its proper value, so then it depends. It was more than a sixth, less than a sixth, or a sixth. Mashenkin, over here we have a situation where hanoisiv hanoisim b'amuna, so then ein li olav eno, there's no din of eno. Ketzat? Chayfetz zeh bekach v'kach lechachta. This is what I paid for the item. In kach ani mistakrebein. This is what I'm going to be earning from the item by selling to you the item. So he's telling you clearly, it could be I overpaid for the item. I'm not telling you this is the price of the item. I'm telling you this is what I paid for the item, and this is what I'm selling you the item for, and this is what I'm earning. So the din is ein li olav eno, the buyer can't have eno on him. And v'hanoisiv hanoisim b'emuna, person that wants to be noisiv b'emuna to tell the buyer how much he paid for the item and how much he's selling the item, is im lokach Keilim rabim begodim b'mem kerachad. He didn't buy one item. He bought a job lot. He bought a lot of one item. So now he's going ahead and he's selling the items. So let's say he bought 5 items, and those 5 items he paid 500 for. Now, so l'chura he could go ahead and say, well, I paid 500 for these 5 items. So each one is really I paid 100 for, and I'm selling it for 150. So that's beseder. That's talking about if he's selling all 5 for 500, or he's selling each one for 100. Masha'inkein, if he goes ahead and he has in the 5 items that he bought, there's 3 of them that's very good items, and 2 of them aren't good items. So mainly the 3 items he's going to go ahead and sell for whatever price they're really worth, and the other 2 items he's going to say, well, I bought 5 items for 500, which means 100 each, and this is what I paid for it, and this is what I'm charging. It's not true. He didn't really pay 100 each for this, because Lepel, he got other items which were worth much more, and he sold it for much more. So therefore, he's not being honest about this being noisim and noisim b'amunah. So therefore, that's what he's saying. To be a Neisen B'Amuna, it has to be either all or nothing. Halachavav. V'hanoisen B'Amuna is Imlakach Keilim Rab. He bought a lot of Keilim. A Begadim, or Begadim B'Mem Korech. Is Liyakshiv is Harab B'Amuna, V'es Hayofa B'Shavi. He's not going to go ahead and say, these two items I bought in this, that was 500 for 5, so maybe the 200 are 200. The two are 200. But the other ones, which are worth much more, he's selling for much more. They all have to be either B'Amuna or he sells it B'Shavyan. In other words, he could go ahead and sell each one for what it's worth, or say all of them B'Shavyan. But to go ahead and say this, in other words, he's not being honest that he paid 100 for it. Because Lepel, he paid 100, paid 500 for 5, but 3 of the 5 was worth much more, and he's charging much more. So Mamela is saying that he paid 100 for these would be not really honest. In other words, he paid for the items, and plus there was transportation. There was bringing it to transport them to wherever he's selling it. So that was also part of his costs. So when he says this item cost him this and this amount of money, he doesn't only have to say how much he paid the seller of this item. He also could include the transporting, and also, let's say, if the transporters had a rest on the way and stop off in some pundik, so that also is part of the expenses of bringing this item here. So that's what he could put into part of the item. When he says, this is what the item costs me, it doesn't have to be only the cost of what he gave the seller, but also the cost including the transporting cost and also whatever expenses were on the way. That's what he's saying. He could add to the price schar hakatov or schar hachamer, the schar of the person that was delivering it, and the schar hachamer, the person, the donkey driver which was delivering it, was schar pundik, and let's say they traveled on the way and they stopped off in some inn. So all of this is part of the expenses of the item. But the fact how much notice he's saying, but I was also involved, so maybe I want to also include managing fees, my managing fees for getting this item here. That he can't add to his expenses of the item. He speaks about the expenses of the item, and his managing fees are included in so to speak, on what he's earning from the item. This is what I paid for that item. This was out of pocket to get this item here, and this is what I want to gain, which that's going to pay for, for all my work and all everything else that was involved. And also I want to earn some money here from this business deal. So the Mela, that's all included in kach v'kach ani mistakar. Halacha zayin, hagoy ein lehino. Because when you're dealing with a goy and you're overcharging him, so the din of eino doesn't apply. Shenamer ish es ochiv, or you're paying him less. And the goy shahoin es yisrael. However, a goy which overcharged the yid, or he undercharged paid the yid, is mazer he noya bedin shalonu. So if we call him to a din Torah, so we could month from a goy to give us back what's rightfully ours, which would be rightfully ours if we'd be dealing with a yid. We're able to take out the money in us if we would have sold it to a yid, and the yid would have, let's say, paid us less than what we really deserve. So we would be able to take the money out of the yid. So certainly we could take the money out of this goy if we're calling him to a din Torah. Halacha ches. Elu dvarim she'en lem hinoya. There are items that the whole din of hinoya doesn't apply, which we learn it out of psukim really. Hakarkois, karka, there's no hinoya in karka, and also v'havodim, and v'hashtaris, which is sell or buy a star, v'hagdeshes and hagdeshes. Afilu mochar shava elev bedinner, a shava dinner be'elev. So either you overcharge, sold something that was worth 1,000 for a dinner, or something you were completely underpaid. A shava dinner be'elev is ein b'meinoy shnemer oikoni miyada misecha. So we learn out miyada misecha. It has to be dover hanik the miyad liyad. Miyada misecha. We have to be an item which is a transferable item. Yotzo karkoy. So that excludes karka, which is not miyad liyad. And also the yotzo avodim shukshul karkois. And that also excludes avodim which are hukshul karkois. And the yotzo shtaris she'ein gufan koni ela l'rayishvem. The whole idea of the shtar is only the raya. And we learn out from the pasuk. It says v'chisimkaru. V'chisimkuru memker, so we're learning out that it has to be an item, that the item itself has a value. Mashengen a star, since a star has no value itself, it's not an intrinsic value. The whole value of the star is because through the star you'll be able to get the money. So therefore that doesn't go into together of v'chisimkuru. So that's these dinim. These dinim is karka, avodim, and shtaris, and aldera zegdeshes, because it says miyad amisecha. So it has to be miyad amisecha, dafke from amisecha, hedjit, and it has to be miyad amisecha, only something which is not karka. So that excludes hegdish, karka, and avodim. And aldera zeh b'nigeya shtaris, because it says kisimkeru. B'medvar halachates. B'medvar mamurim b'meicher nichsi atzmi. If a person sells his own item, and any of these items he sold, so he doesn't have any taina v'ino. Aval hashliach shetoah b'choshu, and also this whole din that there's a sixth and less than a sixth, more than a sixth, all these dinim only apply b'meicher nichsi atzmi, which includes also everything we learned in the previous period. Aval hashliach shetoah b'choshu, a shliach that made any mistake, bein b'metaltel and bein b'karkois, choizer. So he can have charata. It goes back because Lepeil, the Mishalech says, I only sent you as a shliach to do things properly. Mashenkin, if you didn't do things properly, so l'gabe that you're not a shliach. V'nirali, says the Rambam, shekein adin ba'apetrupe shetoah b'kolshu. We're soon going to learn about a din of a bezin, which was toah. So there's a din of a bezin shetoah, and there's a din of apetrupe shetoah. So the Rambam is saying, anirali, that apetrupe has a din of a shliach. That bein b'metalton, bein b'markois chezer. Ve'ein adem lebezin. By a bezna was told, we'll soon learn when the bezna is chezer. Masha'ein came by apetrupas. Apetrupas has the din of a regular shliach. Mepnei shu yochid. Apetrupas is a yochid, so he's not a bezin. So therefore he has the din of a shliach. So nachamol. So we have the regular din of a no, which we learned until now, which was when the person is dealing with his own money. That's when meicher nichsi atzmei. When a person is selling an item that belongs to someone else, and the person paid less, so therefore you had no right. You had no right to sell it in such a manner. Or if you bought an item for more than its real value, so if you're a shliach that's buying an item for more than its real value, or you're selling an item for less than its real value, so the mishalech always could tell the shliach, and therefore you're not really a shliach. Legabi that, you're not a shliach. So until now we spoke about a regular din of Eino, we spoke about the din of Eino of Keilim b'Keilim, we spoke about Peiros b'Peiros, we spoke about Mois Achsera, and then we spoke about things that B'chlal there's no din of Eino, and then we spoke about the difference between Meicher Nichsi Atzmei as opposed to a Shliach, and that an Apotropos has the din of a Shliach. Now Halacha Yud, Bezdin Shemochru Nichse Yisem V'to. So there was a mitzvah that the Yisem had to pay for a certain item, or whatever reason they were selling Nichse Yisemim. Bezdin was selling Nichse Yisemim, and they made a mistake. Bein bekarkois, bein bemetaltalin, so it depends. Im to bepachas mishtus, if their mistake was less than a shtus, so then is areza mechila kehedjit. So just like by a hedjit, less than a shtus is considered mechila. So al derezeh by Bezdin, less than a shtus is considered mechila. However, to b'shtus, if the mistake was a shtus, so normally by hedjit, when there's a mistake in shtus, the hino goes back. Over here, by hegdish, to b'shtus bottle ha-mekach. The whole Mecca becomes bottle. So there was Bezdin Kataina that they want to be Mavatul the Mekach. The Im Rotsu Shalei Levatul Memker. But if Bezdin says, no, I don't want to be Mavatul Memker. And V'yazur I know, but I want the Hino should come back. In other words, I want to deal with it as if we would be a hedjit. Just like by a hedjit, the Hino would come back, because we're talking about a shtus. We're talking about a shtus, to b'shtus. So over there, by hedjit, the Hino would go back. So the Bezdin is saying, I want to deal with this as if we were a hedjit. So the din is machzir le'ekeh hedjit cham miyam. Just like by a hedjit, there's a din that they're machzir eino. So hegdish also has a right. Bezdin rather has a right to make themselves like a hedjit, and therefore there's a din of yachzir eino. Halacha Yudalef nirali shebezdin shemachru karka eavodim shel yisebim shav emonah b'mosayim is ein alikech yochel azra. By karka the din is that there's no din eino. And therefore, if a hedjit sells to a hedjit karka, so any yochel even none of them could be chayzer. Now over here we just learned that if hegdish sold something which was more than a shtus, tol b'shtus, so a shtus. If it's less than a shtus, so we say it's mechila. But if it's more than a shtus, so then it's bottle ha-mekach. If bottle ha-mekach, so if Bezdin undercharged something on karka, so it's bottle ha-mekach. Now what happens if they overcharged? Could the buyer go ahead and say, listen, if you would have undercharged, you would have been able to say, batal ha-mekach. What about if you overcharge? So the Rambam is saying, no. When Bezdin undercharges, so Bezdin could taina over from a sixth onwards, so they can be mevatel the mekach. But if they overcharge, so now the other one wants to be Mevatel HaMekach, so by Mashal by Karka, you could never be Mevatel HaMekach. So who adin, you can't be Mevatel HaMekach against the Bezdin. The Chiddush over here is that even though Bezdin knows this is the same sale, and Bezdin could have Charata, but Lepel, the buyer, can't have Charata. That's just a Nirali. Nirali, Shebezdin Shemachru Karka Avodim Shal Yisemim, Shav Monad Masayim. They sold something that was worth 100 for 200. So if they would have sold something that was worth 200 for 100, they could have had Charata, even though it's Karka, but Lepel, they could have had Charata. But over here, if they sold something which is fakir, they overcharged the buyer, is ein alikech yochel achzer. The likech can't have charata because leiyah kech hedget chomer mikech hayisem. So just like if you would have sold, just like if they would have sold from a regular hedget, so they wouldn't have been able to have charata. So the fact that Bezdin sold something for the yisemim is not going to give them more right. V'chein adin ba'apetrupis shemocher karka ba'avodim, which we learned before that a petrupis shetor bekolshu bein betalt bein ba'avodim, so he could have charata. So that means if he had charata, if he was tor kolshu against the people that he was working for, he was doing something for the detriment of the yisemim. So then when he was tor kolshu bein betalt bein ba'karkois, so he can have charata for the benefit of the yisemim. But on the other end, the person that he sold it to, and that person was hurt, so it's just like if he would have been buying it from a regular person, he wouldn't have been able to have charata, because we're talking about karka. So hu adin, if he's buying it from an apetupis, he also can have charata. V'chein adin ba'apetupis shemocher karka ba'avodim. So even though the apetupis himself could have charata, l'toivas hayisemim, ab'she'en alikech yochel lazer behinoi. The hedget, the lekech, which is a hedget, wouldn't be able to have chayze by nok. He didn't hedge it, just like if he would have bought it from a hedget. Halacha Yud Beis. Ha'achim v'ashutfim shechol ka'metaltlim. There's the brothers yarshin together and then divided the metaltlim amongst each other, and they assessed the metaltlim their value. This metaltlim keneged this metaltlim is harein kelekuches. They have the same din of a lekuches. And pakas mishtus is nikna mekach ve'imachzer klum, because we assumed that there was mechila. Yeser al shtus, it was more than a shtus, is bottle mekach. However, shtus, so it's kanu mazir ino, the same din of regular ino. Now that's talking about if they stamas, they made a division. However, vim hisnu b'neim sheyachluku b'shum hadayonim, that their chalukah should have a din of shum hadayonim, it should have a din of shum hadayonim as if dayonim assessed it, and then v'to b'shtus, and then there was a mistake b'shtus, is bottle chalukah, because that's the din. By shum hadayonim, we learned before that shum hadayonim, if it was a tov b'shtus, is bottle chalukah. Shadayonim shishamu pichasu shtus ayisiru shtus is always michram bottle, like we learned earlier. So b'meila, so if they said that the chalukah should have a din of shum hadayonim, should be b'shum hadayonim, so his should be named sheachluka b'shum hadayonim. So then, if it was a mistake, the tov b'shtus is bottle chalukah. Halacha Yud Gimel. Ha-behema, v'ha-margolis, v'ha-sayev, v'ha-sefer teira, which there's like, these are expensive items, and there would be a svara that it's not so clear what the price is, even if you overprice it. But nevertheless, maybe since they're so expensive items, so even if you gave more for it, so it's not enough. So the chiddush is no arein kishar metalton. They have the din like regular metalton, and v'yesh bem ino, and they have ino. So notice the fact that they're like choshev metalton, but nevertheless there's din ino. Ein l'chadav shein beino chutz me'arbot dvarim shemanu chacham, except for the four things that we mentioned before, which was karka, avodim, shtaris, and hegdish. V'hu sheyeh mecher kena b'nichsi atzmi k'mesha b'yarno. This din is only when the person is selling his own items. So then there's a din of ino. Mashenkin, if he's selling the din, someone else's items, so then even if it's the smallest mistake, so it's a bittul mekach. Halacha Yudalit. Kshem shein lekarkois ino. If you go ahead and buy karka, we sell karka, there's no ino. Kach schiras karka. When you rent karka, is also ein leino. Afilu socher traklun gadol, a large hall, b'dinner b'shana, for one dinner for a whole year, which is very underpriced. Or refis ktana b'dinner b'chol yem, where a refis, a place where you keep behemoths, a stable, and you're paying a dinner for each day, is either way ein leino. In other words, renting an area is just like buying an area, there's no ino, renting an area is no ino. Now, seichel is hapeh lasis imei, a person hires someone to work for him, ben bekarka ben metalton, regardless of what he's working for, but it's like ein leino. Why? Because it's as if he's buying him for the day. He's paying for his work for that day. And v'avadim ein ben meino. So just like we said, avodim ein ben meino, if you buy an evet, so an evet you buy permanently. So ein ben meino. So a pile, you're not buying permanently, you're buying today's work. So just like there's no eino on an evet, hu adin, there's no eino on a pile. Halacha tezayin, sochrei lizrei likarka. A person hires someone to go ahead and plant the karka for him. And the question is, how many seeds does he have to put out in the karka? Va'amar, and he claims, the worker, that Zoraiti ba zriya haroiloi. I went ahead and I planted the amount of seeds that this field should have. Now Ubo Edom came and say Shezara ba pachas min haroiloi, that there was zriya pachas min haroiloi. Now over here it's like a little bit of a shiloh. In other words, if he gave less than the amount of seeds that was supposed to be there, so l'chura, we're going to learn later that a davar shebeminyan, if we make up a certain amount and you give less than that amount, that has nothing with a no. A no means it's a price difference. But if it's an amount, you're giving less amount than what you were supposed to give, so then it's obviously that's something which is chayzer. So over here, l'chura, he planted less. But Weiss says over here, the issue is, he assumed that this is the amount that the field needs. This is, I'm not sure, I don't understand so clearly, because of course he planted less. But it seems like since he assumed that this is the amount that the field needs, and Lepel, the Edom are coming along and saying that the field needs more, so over here it becomes a suffix whether or not saying no. The suffix really is, on one hand, he's supposed to plant the seeds. And since the seeds are metaltalin, so there's Einoi metaltalin. Even though the type of Einoi is the amount of seeds, so the Chur over there, there's always Einoi. But I'll call upon him. There's a svara that since we're dealing with the amount of seeds that he was supposed to plant, so therefore we're dealing with Einoi metaltalin. And on the other end, he was supposed to sow the karka. The idea wasn't the seeds. The idea was that the karka should be planted. So it's a din in karka, and karka ain't leino. So mela over here, there's a suffix in such a situation whether it's a no. I don't have it so clearly, but let's read it again. Halacha tezayin. Zachrei l'srei karka. A person hires someone to sow for him karka, to plant seeds in there. And va'amar, and he claims, Araiti bazriya haroyiba. I planted the amount of seeds which are appropriate for this field. Now Ubo Edom, and Edom are coming along and saying, no, Shazara ba pachas min haroyilo. He planted less. So the question is, if there's a no in this exchange, is areza suffix and yeshla no mepnei azera? Because since the issue is how much seeds he planted, and the seeds are metaltalin, so mele there would be a din of no, and all the rules of a law, no would apply would be pachas mishtus, yes mishtus, and shtus. Or maybe since there's no ino here, mipnei karka, because we're dealing with planting karka, putting seeds into the karka. Is lefichach ein mitziyim miyad hanitva. We might see miyad hanitva, which is the zereya, because could be there's no dinino, and v'chein ein mashbiyan eisa elishvos hesses, because tzad karka sheyeshkan, because there's a tzad karka that there's a svara that the issue is a karka issue. Because the issue is, did he plant, or was he supposed to plant? How many seeds was he supposed to plant? So the seeds aren't metaltal, but on the other hand, he's planting it on the karka. So the question is it a karka issue, or is it a metaltal issue? I think it needs further explanation. This halacha yud zayin hasoicher is a Keilim is a behema. A person rents Keilim or behema. Yesh lamino because she'aschirus mechira bas yemi. Just like we learned before that a poil is you're buying him for a day, and while that is the schirus of karka, you're being seichert for a day, and therefore there's no ino. So over here fakert when you're being seichert Keilim, so it's like you're buying it for the day, and maybe just like if you buy it, there's a no. So what if you rent it, there's a no. If you overcharge them by a sixth or more, regardless of who was overcharged or undercharged, who was nana, is always a marzerino. So there's no din over here of bittul mecca because we're dealing with a renting situation. The question is, do you have to reimburse the person? Do you have to reimburse the person for the ino? So the din is, if it's less than a shtus, he doesn't have to be reimbursed because we assume there was mechila. But if it's a shtus or more, so then he has to be reimbursed. Hareza marzerino, vafil alachas mamarubi, even if a lot of time transpired. Halacha yudches. Nirali shahakablon yesh lehino. Ketzat kigein shekibul olav lereg beged zeh basora zuzim a litver choluk zeh b'shnei zuzim. So the din is harei zeh yesh lehino. So the din is, as we learned before, if you hire someone to do something, and you either overpaid him or underpaid him, So since a person has a din of avodim, so therefore there's no din of ino. There's no din of ino legabi the wage for the day. Masha'engen, if you hire someone not to do something by the day, you hire someone to make a beged for you. So basically, you're hiring him to give you an item. The item is the beged. In other words, you're giving him maybe the material, and he's going to return to you the finished product. So basically, he's giving you a product. He's not giving you his work. He's not giving you himself. He's giving you the product which he's providing you, and that's a price. So since we're dealing with a product, so therefore there's a no on the problem. Like that's what we say. He accepted upon himself that he's going to make this baguette for 10 zuz. A lit for cholik zeh b'shnei zuzim, where he's going to charge a certain amount, shnei zuzim, to sew a certain garment. So the din is harei zeh yesh lo inos, it is a no. So which means that if he undercharged or he overcharged, either way, either he has to pay back the money that he took, or he has to get back the money that he didn't take. V'chol echad mishneim, ben kablan, ben bal beged, choizer lo'olam k'moicher. Which means that they knows over here, normally we said that a likech, when you buy an item, so you could only be choizer until a certain time, till the time that you showed the item that you bought. Mashenkin over here, when you go ahead and hire someone to do work for you, so you hire someone to do work for you, so it's very possible that you won't really realize that you were overcharged or undercharged until much later. So therefore, ben kablan, ben balabeget, Sai, the person that hired the kablan, and Sai the kablan could always have charot and say, listen, we made this deal a month ago, and you should know, I realize now that I undercharged you, or I realize now that I overpaid you. In other words, why didn't you realize till now? Because I didn't realize till now. In other words, when I buy an item, so the chances are that I showed it to someone, and I showed someone how much I paid for the item, and then I realized that I overpaid or underpaid. Masha'en came over here, when you hire someone to make you an item, so chances are you're not going to know that you overpaid or you were you're overcharged or you're undercharged, and therefore you could always have charata from the. In other words, you're not charata to mon whatever I know is coming to you.